US President Donald Trump has threatened a very strong action if Iranian authorities execute anti-government protesters. Trump has already said that Iran is past his red lines on killing the protesters. A US-based rights group reports that the death toll in Iran has crossed 2,500. Reports also say that Iran could soon execute one of the arrested protesters. Trump says that it would have serious consequences for Tehran.
I haven't heard about the hanging. If they hang him, you're going to see some things that I don't know what where you come from and what your thought process is, but you'll perhaps be very happy.
What do you mean by that?
We will take very strong action. If they do such a thing, we will take very strong action.
Trump has repeatedly threatened to use force if the government in Tehran does not stop the killings. But so far, the only visible action that has been taken is an order to impose 25% tariffs on Iran's trading partners. A report citing sources close to the White House claims that Trump is less certain on a military action as of now, after giving out all those threats. Russia and China have already warned against any US intervention. Multiple reports claim that even Trump's allies, both domestically and internationally, are not fully on board with a military plan. Now, the Wall Street Journal reported that some political allies have even warned Trump against abandoning the America First policy. Trump may face potential backlash from his MAGA movement if he uses military force in Iran. Now, that is also seen as the reason why US has not publicly backed Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince, the son of the exiled Shah, who was deposed back in 1979. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, reportedly met Pahlavi recently, but that meeting was to be kept under wraps. Reports also suggest that US regional allies are not in favor of a military strike. According to NBC News, Israeli officials told their American interlocutors that while they support a regime change, they are worried that foreign military action may not be enough. They also fear that any attack or escalation by Israel or the US will only unite Iranians and weaken the protest. Another report claimed that Saudi Arabia and other Arab Gulf states have privately urged the US not to strike Iran. They have warned that any military action or regime change could destabilize the region, disrupt oil markets, and even hurt their security and economies around. Qatar's Prime Minister Al Thani talked to security of Iranian National Security Council, Ali Larijani. After that call, the Qatari Prime Minister called for de-escalation and peaceful solutions. Now, interestingly, Larijani, who is a close aide of Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei, had earlier directly blamed Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for the protests, calling them main killers of the people of Iran. Iran has warned the US against any intervention. It claimed that the unrest and the chaos to manufacture a pretext for military intervention was part of the US playbook. And this came after Trump cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials. So far, there has been little reported US movement on the military front. But this could change very quickly. Unconfirmed reports of US aerial refueling tankers arriving in Hawaii have sparked speculations of potential long-range bomber operations. Analysts say that it mirrors tanker movements that were seen prior to the US strikes in Iran back in June of last year during the 12-day war, during which bombers operated with their transponders deactivated. Back in June, Trump had maintained silence till he ordered an attack on Iranian nuclear sites. He said he may or may not attack, and then finally we saw the attacks taking place from the US side when US joined Israel. So as of now, the question remains, is the Trump camp in dilemma regarding how to deal with the protests in Iran and how to deal with the clerical government? Or is this a deliberate strategy to keep everyone guessing? Dilemma or deliberate strategy? That's what we discuss. I'm now being joined on Point Counterpoint by Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for the Republicans overseas in the UK. And I'm also joined by Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College, Dublin. Jennifer, let me start with you. There have been a lot of statements that have been coming in from the Trump camp, from Trump himself rather, And they've been going on since the beginning of the year at least. It's been almost 2 weeks. We've heard it all by now. We're going to take very strong action. Red lines have been crossed. We're locked and loaded, ready to go. But then there were reports that started coming in that the Pentagon's assessment of any kind of military action inside Iran is perhaps contrary to these kind of rhetoric statements or threats. Then we also heard statements and reports suggesting that nations close to the US, even the likes of Israel, are suggesting not to exercise a military option. And there are also reports suggesting his close aides are also suggesting not to go in for a military option. There are differing accounts now coming in when you listen to Trump and his aides separately. Is there a dilemma in the Trump camp regarding how to deal with Iran? Or is this a strategy?
I think the answer is both. I mean, I'll just deal with the strategy first. I mean, as you know, and you mentioned earlier, Trump likes to keep people guessing about what he's going to do. So I think part of this is a strategy. However, with regards to dilemma, he does have a very big dilemma because the America First movement, especially anyone under the age of 30, does not want to see America involved in a lot of these international wars. They voted for the president, in fact, to get out of many of these conflicts and concentrate on the country and the issues that we have. So the other issue is that if you were to watch the American news, you will see that the president is being pulled in a multitude of different directions. Either it's Prince, Pahlavi's angle, or it's MEK, or it's indeed, I'm sad to say, but in our country, we have a very big military industrial complex. And there's a lot of US politicians who would love nothing more than for us to get involved in a military way in Iran. So it depends. Politically, there is zero upside for Trump doing military action. He may be convinced by people who want to see this that he could do something quick, easy, like a Soleimani, where he was in and out, or even that, 12-day war. There were not a lot of repercussions, but people are also remembering the 20 years of failed foreign policy in Afghanistan and around the Middle East. And these things are not as easy as a lot of the people who want to see military action will make them out to be. So yes, dilemma.
Understood. Professor Lucas, let me come to you. Jennifer, very honestly has shown and expressed the shortcomings as well as where Trump stands and how he's getting pulled in multitudes of directions. When it comes to the rhetoric, I understand your views, but if you could share with us, do you find there to be more dilemma than strategy, or is this more strategy than dilemma? How do you see it?
Well, I think you have to start off with the fact that Donald Trump actually knows very little about Iran. And it's probably more important to consider what his advisors are looking at, what possible actions that they're considering. And I'm talking about military advisors, I'm talking about diplomatic advisors, I'm talking about even economic advisors. I think the first point is that from a practical point of view, the U.S. has moved a lot of its military assets out of the region. They did so because of the effort to intimidate Venezuela, including putting most of their naval assets there. So they don't exactly have the capability that they had even back in June. Secondly, it's not just Israel that is warning the United States against taking this step. It's actually the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia. And then I think probably the most important thing, because I think the most important thing is actually to start from the ground in terms of what Iranians perceive and what Iranians want is that if the Trump administration launched military action against the regime, they probably put a target on the back of the protesters because the regime's line, and I've seen this all the way back to the late 1990s, whenever they're threatened by protest, is to say, oh, the protesters are just working for the U.S., working for Israel. And if the U.S. launches military action, the regime can say, look, see, protesters, you just were working for a country which has attacked us. And that's how they'll try to rally support. I think it'd be far more effective here. And we have to see if Trump advisors are looking at this to do two things. One is to open up communications as much as is possible, both inside Iran and into Iran. And the Trump government has actually blocked its main radio station, Radio Farda, from actually broadcasting into Iran. I think that's a bad step. Secondly, I think you actually call for the release of political prisoners in Iran, because a lot of those political prisoners are the leadership that could actually help mobilize and organize the opposition as they carry these protests farther.
Understood. Professor Lucas, you raise a pertinent point, and that is a thought that is resonating with a lot of people. Jennifer, I want to come to you with that. Professor Lucas is also suggesting, and a lot of people I have also heard suggesting the same, that any kind of a strike or military intervention by the US in Iran, it only goes in the favor of the clerical government, because then they get to say, see, the protesters are just pawns, and it's the US which is kind of orchestrating the entire unrest inside the country. Do you see it the same way?
I do, actually. I very much do. And in order for this to work, it has to come from the Iranian people, which you're seeing. That's what we're seeing on the ground. But if all of a sudden Israel or America or Europe or whomever else, quite frankly, jumps in and takes over, there could be severe consequences for the people that are trying to protest. And also, everybody's got an angle here, right? So if the Americans do jump in, and do military strikes, 3 months from now, people are going to say, oh, that was a mistake, right? So the best thing to do is to, quite frankly, stay out of it. I also agree with Professor Lucas, open the communications. That's been very surprising to me that those have been closed off, considering that, if anything, President Trump has been criticized in the past he'll talk to anyone, right? He'll talk to North Korea, he'll talk to Russia when the Europeans wouldn't over Ukraine, Russia for the last 3.5 years. So I'm somewhat surprised that he canceled the meetings, saying as long as, these killings were still going on. So let's see. But I think diplomacy and communication is always better. I know that sounds naive, but we cannot have the U.S. go in doing military strikes. It's not going to help the people that it's meant to help, which are the people in Iran.
I hear your point. Professor Lucas, a lot of what is coming out from the Trump camp and from the president himself, how much do you find that having strategic implications, or is this, as I discussed with you earlier, is this more for the headlines? Is it more for actually solving the situation?
It depends on which part of the Trump administration you talk about. When it comes to Trump, if you talk about the wider context, Donald Trump just likes to threaten folks, even as he calls himself a president of peace, and he likes to take stuff. So the reason why the so-called president of peace went after Venezuela, in part, and he has said this, is because it has oil. The reason why he is threatening Greenland to the point of a military operation against a NATO ally, Denmark, is because Greenland has stuff. It has rare earth minerals. Iran has oil, and Trump has said in the past that he wants the oil from the region. So I think, you kind of have to put Trump off the side and say, are there others in the administration who are looking at this in terms of tactically and strategically? And I think the answer is yes. I think the U.S. military, far from itching to go back in and to bomb Iran yet again, is worried that this would destabilize the entire Middle East. And remember, we're only a few months away from what is a very fragile ceasefire that was established in Gaza. And there's a risk to that if this escalates. I think U.S. diplomats, the adults in the room, realize this does not necessarily help America's international position when you have this obvious contradiction between supposedly a United States that at one point was going to work with allies to stabilize areas, and then a United States that might act on its own in a way that is destabilizing. It will be interesting to see what happens today, because there are Danish officials in Washington to talk about the Greenland episode. And I think other European officials, other officials, including from India, are going to be telling the Trump administration, and I mean here, the military, the intelligence services, and the diplomats, tread very carefully here. And first and foremost, help Iranians in a way which help the protest, not just in the short term, but in the longer term, because this is going to continue for some time, even if the regime can suppress the protest in the near future.
Well, Professor Lucas, thanks so much for sharing your insights as well. It will be safe to say that the playbook is not what it was in Trump's first term, because all that we've seen, whether it was Yemen, whether it was Nigeria, and most recently in Venezuela, also in Syria, and of course in Iran in June, this is not the same playbook. That doesn't dictate what's going to happen next. We'll need to really wait and watch finally what the Trump administration decides to do. Does it go by what Trump is saying, or will it pay heed to what the aides are all collectively suggesting? It will go against what the protesters are standing for in Iran. Both my guests, thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer Ewing and Scott Lucas.
Thank you.